do we see one of the big assaults on Christianity in the Bible is contradictions in the Bible? Do we see any, Robert, that are glaring contradictions in the Quran?
Oh, there are plenty of contradictions in the Quran. Many, many, ranging from the question of whether God created the world in 6 days or 8. There are several accounts, and in a couple of them he creates the world in 6 days, as in Genesis, and in one of them he creates the world in 8 days. And there are also contradictions in terms of Islamic teaching. Like at one point it says alcohol has some benefit, but its harm outweighs its good. And then later, in another place in the Quran, it says that alcohol is from the devil. Well, if alcohol is from the devil, then how is it that it had some benefit in the first place? And so even the Quran itself actually explains or attempts to explain away those contradictions by saying that when God in it says, when we cancel a verse or cause it to be forgotten, we'll give you one that's just as good or better.
Mm-hmm. Do Muslims drink alcohol?
Well, sure, because all people, human nature is everywhere the same, and people do all sorts of things. But Islam forbids the drinking of alcohol. Some Muslims obviously drink alcohol anyway.
All right, but it is verboten inside of Islam. All right, Robert Spencer, author of The Complete Infidel's Guide to the Quran. What about let's get into some of the dicier stuff here that is, I think, extremely important. The Muslims and the Jews. What is it, Rob? Is there something that has really caused them to be as torqued as they are toward the Jewish people? What's the deal?
Well, Muhammad presented himself as a Jewish prophet. He presented himself as a guy who had exactly the same message as the biblical prophets. And it seems as if he expected the Jews to accept him as one of their prophets. And there were powerful Jewish tribes in Arabia that he was courting. But when they rejected him and said, how can you be a Jewish prophet when you're not even Jewish, then he turned against them with a particular savagery. And this manifested itself particularly in his saying that the Jews are going to be the worst enemies of the Muslims, which is something that has caused havoc for the Jews throughout history because it's in the Quran.
So basically he was shunned and they became his special enemy.
Yeah.
He
was rejected, and so he turned against them, and really they've been paying for that ever since, because unfortunately, with Muhammad being the excellent example of conduct and the Quran being the supreme guide for Muslims in the world, then if he says that the Jews are the worst enemies of the Muslims, and that's just the way it is, and it's the way it is for all time and in all situations, including up to nowadays. It's not just something that's restricted to his time.
What about the Christians? Because we're right up there.
The Christians, it says, are going to be the best friends of the Muslims. And then it turns around and also says, don't take Jews and Christians as your friends. And so the Christians are going to be closest to the Muslims, but then it's not clear which Christians are meant, because the Quran also says that the Christians who say that Jesus is the Son of God are under the curse of God. And so it seems unlikely that these accursed people, which would mean pretty much all Christians, are the people who are the closest friends of the Muslims. And then it becomes clear that if Jesus is a Muslim prophet, as is taught in the Quran, then really the true Christians are essentially the Muslims themselves, or the Christians who become Muslim.
Mm-hmm. But
they're the ones who are the friends of the Muslims.
Okay, I understand why he's so angry and why they're so angry at the Jewish people. Okay, but was there something that really set him off?
Well, with the Christians? Well, the Christians didn't accept him either. In Islamic tradition, you'll find lots of stories of both rabbis and Christian priests saying, wow, this is the prophet, and then refusing to accept him. There's even a story of a group of Christians going to see Muhammad, and the leader of them tells the other Christians on the way that they know this guy is a prophet, but they're not going to admit that he's a prophet, and they're not going to accept him as a prophet, because then they would not get the money they're getting from the Byzantines. And so it's all about money, see, and the Christians are in bad faith. This is what a Muslim is going to learn if he studies his religious texts.
All right, when we come back with Robert Spencer, author of The Complete Infidel's Guide to the Quran, what about honor killings? wife beatings, the life of Mohammed? When we return with Robert Spencer on Wretched Radio.